friend. It's good to see you, Mr. Unfiltered. Lucky's in the house. I always want to call you by your real name, but I have to stop myself.
It's always good to see you, man.
It's always good to see, even though we talk on the phone and it's like we get off the phone and now we're live. How amazing is that, right?
Yeah, right?
Well, I hope you're ready because we had a hearing that started off in Judge Hippler's courtroom there in Moscow, Idaho, that seemed like it was just going to be off to that boring, not much to see hearing. I mean, they were going through the basics. We were all pretty excited to hear about this alternative perp. I mean, did you expect to hear anything, Lucky? I mean, what was your thought on that?
I thought we might hear something. I was looking forward to hearing something, that's for sure. But I
Yeah,
wasn't surprised.
I think just about everybody had their hopes that we were going to learn a little something new of what the defense's plan on that was going to be, and potentially maybe even hearing a few names put out there. But that didn't happen today, and we'll talk about that. But we did have a little bit of a surprise at the end of the hearing, and of course, when I asked you about it on the phone, you proved how this normally works. You cut off watching it before you got to the end, didn't you, Lucky?
I missed the good part, I guess. But
Yeah,
that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here now, because we're going to talk about all this.
that's right. That's right. We got to throw it around. We got to get people discussing it because it's pretty big, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody that you were watching that Dateline special, and I didn't mean to do that. I apologize, but there's going to be our first question when we get to it. Lucky, I didn't mean to throw that up there so fast, but Jacob will definitely get to that here in a minute. I that Dateline special, I kept debating on whether I was going to do some content in regards to that special because I saw everybody's interpretation about it. I saw both sides of that coin where many just kind of threw it to the side that it, wasn't that big of a deal. It's all things we've heard before. And then I saw the overreactions of the people that were on the fence that now are completely on the guilter side of things because they feel as though everything stated was just bona fide evidence. It couldn't be hearsay. It's got to be bona fide evidence. But today, at the end of this hearing, they're lucky Judge Hippler put his foot down. He assigned a special prosecutor that is going to investigate leaks. And I do have the document, which we'll show here in a while, and we'll discuss that, where he has let it be known that he wants to look into the prosecution and law enforcement in regards to who or why this leak potentially happened.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was curious, I actually did make a video about the Dateline special, and I just never uploaded it. And maybe I'll upload that tonight after our live. I just never uploaded the video. I felt like, I really felt like it was a lot of information that we had already seen. I feel like there was some new information, some new visuals, but I felt like it was kind of the same concept. But I was curious about what was going to happen and what was going to be the response of the defense, because I was wondering how Ann Taylor felt about that.
Well, and I think many of us were, and we knew this hearing was upcoming because, as we all knew, we've been waiting patiently for this alternative perp discussion. We knew that this hearing was a pre-trial conference hearing, which for many out there that haven't been through the system, which is a good thing, this is really the last major hurdle before you get into the jury selection process and you get moving towards the trial. This is the last conference to where things get ironed out before, you move forward between the defense and the prosecutors. So we felt as though the big discussion today was going to be alternative perp, but Ann Taylor stepped to the plate prior to this hearing kicking off this morning. And I wondered why it was late. It's rare for me to get up and move it around, Lucky, like I got something to do in the morning. And I was up hours before this, even watching JB Gunner over there on his channel early this morning. And obviously they were running late, and there's a good reason why. They were talking behind the scenes in private, and there's no doubt in my mind the Dateline was the conversation. And Judge Hippler came out, and he's already put out his motions on the record. And, now we're going to see how that all plays out. Who's leaking that shouldn't be leaking?
It's going to be interesting.
And I think you and I had a good conversation, like many that we do. And for those of you out there that love to hop on, Lucky and I behind the scenes are just your normal everyday two individuals that like to talk about true crime. We don't really get into any type of back and forth or arguments of who's guilty, not guilty, why they're guilty. We like to just talk thoughts and true crime. And that's one reason why we get along so well. And when it came to this discussion, we both knew there was a problem here with that Dateline Special and the information that was being passed. And I think we were both in agreement it was a little overboard right before jury selection, that this is kind of a step in the wrong direction. And it's good to see that the judge has kind of put his foot down and realized that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, I watched it a few times, and the first time I watched it, it just kind of, like I said, it looked like a lot of the same information. And then we always hear things in the background. So it was a lot of things that we were also hearing in the background, such as what was on Brian Koberger's phone and some, some accusations about his search history, stuff like that. So, we had already talked about all of that. So when it came out, it was interesting to see. I mean, I felt like it was an attack on Brian Koberger's character. I think that it seems strange to put that out right now. And, but, it was interesting to watch.
Well, it is, in most normal people's minds, this is a very interesting, strange time for a piece like that to come out. But as you know, Lucky, one of my strives when I came to this platform is not to try to prove whether someone committed a crime, didn't commit a crime. I'm not trying to prove innocence or guilt. I really wanted to step to the plate and discuss how the process typically works its way through, and even to show the goods and the bads. And in this situation, unfortunately, that's why people are calling this a hit piece. And it literally did that. Whether this information is real or not is not something I'm going to be able to tell you with all certainty, because there's a good possibility some of this is real and true. And by the way, the judge is attacking this as if something was let out of the bag that could truly lead a jury in a bad direction. This case kind of tells me I need to step back and realize some of this might be true. There could be potentially things that are coming out that I didn't think were true that are potentially true. And you got to be open-minded to those types of things.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of watched this Dateline Special with an open mind. There were some things that I did learn in this, if they are factual, if it does turn out that they are factual. And there were some things that I was bothered by in this special. But like I said, we never really get a confirmation. It's always something that, it's always speculation. So I think that the way that Dateline presented this show was kind of like, this is what happened. But, I think that we always have to remind ourselves that this is all circumstantial. This is all speculation, just like what we do. They just do it in a bigger type of production.
I just think that's where the problem lies, is the amount of people reached with possible misinformation. It's quite a large gap between someone like myself that's just under 12,000 subs and maybe potentially 8,000 to 9,000 views per video, compared to a show that reaches millions
Right.
of people. And like you said, even yourself, you dove back in and watched it numerous times to try to get a better feel for what you were hearing. Just imagine how many people did that. And the problem with that is how many people in Idaho did that. And that's potentially an issue, because if you don't know if it's real or unreal, right or wrong, it still goes into the mindset of, well, this proves he's guilty. This proves it.
Right. Right. And I think that's why it's always very important to remember that, this is all circumstantial evidence. And you have to remember that, Dateline obviously is getting this information from sources that obviously believe that Brian Kohberger is definitely guilty. So, they're kind of just looking at one side. And that's kind of the reason I was disappointed, because, and I don't know why I was disappointed. I should have expected what I saw. But I was kind of disappointed because I did think that we might see some objective reporting. And, if you notice, whenever you watched these mainstream media shows that are on, it's always just one side. It's always just the guilty side. They never talk about the problems with the evidence, the problems with the investigation. They never talk about that stuff. It's always basically, being shoved down your throat that Brian Kohberger is guilty.
I agree with you. And in most cases, these shows come out after the verdict of trial. These shows don't normally air pre-trial, before jury selection, and just roll out. And we're watching books, we're watching documentaries, we're watching people hit the streets of YouTube to do, interviews, and we're not seeing it done on the opposite side of things. We're not seeing groves of people come out and do these things in Brian Kohberger's favor. We're not seeing any type of documentaries or book written about how potentially Brian Kohberger's not the one. We're only seeing the guilt side. And look, I get so many people were disappointed in the Dateline, and I want to kind of preface this and say I wasn't ultimately, like, I'm not upset by the fact they go out and they talk to people. I'm not upset if they go out and they find people that potentially were at that pool party that saw Brian Kohberger and engaged with Brian Kohberger, and they gave their 2 cents on that. I have no problem with that.
Right.
My problem is the releasing potentially of stuff from Brian Kohberger's cell phone that's supposed to be in an evidence locker to be utilized at trial. So I don't mind opinion. I don't mind people stepping to the plate to describe what they've seen with Brian Kohberger, what they know of Brian Kohberger. As long as they're not testifying at trial, I don't have a problem with that. That's fair rights to people to be able to say how they feel or what they want to say. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
But it was quite obvious with some of these things said, these things should not have come out. The photos that were supposedly from Brian Kohberger's cell phone, let's say they are just selfies of Brian Kohberger that he's snapping of himself. I don't know if Brian Kohberger's shooting those via text message to a buddy. I don't know if he's sending them to a girl that he's asking on a date off of a dating app, and there's the selfie picture in the middle of the night of his. I don't know. But I know at the end of the day what it was utilized for by Dateline, and that was to project a very negative image of Brian Kohberger that potentially is really just a kid wearing a hoodie around Christmas time in Pennsylvania when it's cold.
Right.
I just kind of have a problem.
Think about this. I mean, how cool would it be to watch a special where they actually looked at both sides? How cool would that be to watch a special where they talked about both sides? I think that's something I would be interested in watching. I love new information. I'm always anxious to see new information. But my thing is I would just love to watch one of these shows one time that is balanced, balanced and non-biased. That's what I would be interested in.
Maybe you and I got to do that. maybe you and I come out with that balanced show, and we'll mass produce it onto YouTube, and we'll just do an actual balanced, right down the middle. I'm on the fence. I haven't found anybody guilty. I haven't found anybody innocent. We're just going down the line. But the problem is, and I think that you and I have discussed this to a point that we agree with this gag order, this dissemination order that's been placed very early on in this case.
Thanks, KB.
Has really just kind of just screwed all this up. We sit right now because of that, and that's where I think we have a problem. And just to let everybody know, we definitely appreciate everybody that's here enjoying the show.
Absolutely. And whether it doesn't matter whether you believe that Bryan Kohberger committed this crime or not, you're welcome here. We want to have this discussion. And, we just got to keep it respectful, and let's all just talk about true crime. I think that, to me, that's why we're on here, is to get everybody's perspective.
Yeah, and the one thing that Lucky and I, we strive to be very positive in nature. We're not going to put anybody down. We're not going to disrespect any other content creators. We're not going to disrespect anybody for their opinions in the case. And all that we ask are, as those that are in the chat with us today, let's be the same with everybody. Let's be on the same ground of respect, and just enjoy a good conversation. And we're going to take questions, and we're going to mingle with you guys. I know, Lucky, you're big on doing your shout outs to your community, and I'm going to step aside here for a second, allow you to do that, because I want you to be able to say hello to everybody. But let's just all be on the same page that we're talking true crime. We're talking about a case. Bryan Kohberger's in custody. He's waiting to go to trial. We don't know all the facts. We don't know anything more than the man has been charged with a crime, and we're moving towards trial. There's some things that look bad for him when it comes to evidence, and there's some things that are highly questionable that we have to wait for trial to play out before we fully understand what's in front of us.
I agree.
So if you want to take a moment, I'm trying to get my eyes to focus a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm still completely blind in the right eye, but I'm working with the left eye to try to get, I had the worst laser surgery. I called Lucky literally crying about a laser surgery I had done in my left eye, where they do what's called burns of the inner eye for the blood hemorrhaging that's happening on the inside of my left eye. And I've never endured anything like that. I'll never do it again. It's just, it's the worst thing in the world. And Truth Nation Uncensored, it's great to see you. It's been a while. I'm glad you were able to make it in. And everybody else that's here. Again, I'm not seeing real well. Lucky, I'm going to kind of hand it over to you to say hello to our crowd and to our community, because I think we share a lot of it, and I think you'll do a great job of doing that for us.
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's here. It's already a really good crowd. And like I said, if you've noticed, if you watch my channel, and if you've noticed, to me, I really am trying to get everything kind of back to the middle. I'm trying to look at all of the information as objective, as we can. And I think that it's going to be very important, because what a lot of people don't realize is that there's going to be a lot more information that comes out as we get closer to trial. And so for me, it's so important that we look at everything, for what it is. And to me, that makes a more interesting discussion. And I think that, and I feel like a lot of you guys feel the same way. Now, I have a members only live that I do once a week, and it's a really neat group of people. It's a really cool community of open-minded individuals who just want to talk about true crime. And it's so interesting, the lives that we do and the discussions that we have. It's very interactive, and it's really interesting because everybody gets to express their opinion. It doesn't matter, if you believe that Bryan Kohberger's guilty, or if you believe that he's innocent, or if you're on the fence. I welcome everybody. because I want to hear everybody's perspective. You know, it's important in my opinion.
Well, Lucky, I think you just like to talk.
You know, I just kind of like to talk. You know, it's one of those things, you know, that my members only lives. It's funny because, you know, I always said I'm only going to do an hour and a half, and that's what I want to do. And we go 2.5, 3 hours sometimes, because it really is an open discussion, and it's very interesting because everybody kind of has a say. You know, we don't always agree. And, you know, but we do it respectfully, and that's what's important. So it's really interesting. It's very interesting to me, and I learn a lot in these lives as well.
Yeah, and this is something that I truly enjoy doing. When I get somebody like yourself or Pete, I want to give Pete Murder Metal Mayhem a big shout out. He's a good friend of both of ours,
Absolutely.
and he's been really knocking it out of the ballpark over there, doing his thing with not only his content, but he's really battling. He's working his way through some medical situations that, you know, I have so much respect for him for overcoming. And I know he's excited because he's moving forward into some new endeavors in that health that are going to really help him, you know, get a firm grasp. And I want to let everybody know, like, I'm in a very positive nature. The eye situation, I mean, it's a long drawn out situation. I thought that this would be really in motion. And now, you know, like I was telling you, Lucky, I've got a new surgeon that has to step up to the plate because the surgery that I'm waiting on the right eye is more in depth than what they were expecting it to be. Um, so I'm hoping to be back, Lucky, and capable of being in Idaho, in Moscow for the trial, because I really like doing that boots on the ground. When my wife and I were able to be at the Ada County Courthouse just for that hearing in April, that was just so much fun. I know it's not supposed to be a fun situation because a man's life is on the line and 4 people lost their lives and we got victims' families. But to be able to get the feel of it and to be there, and just that's something that I would like to dive into more, not only in the Idaho case, but across the board, true crime altogether. And hopefully I can do that. But you know, in the discussion, Lucky, with the eye doctor and the surgeons, they don't know if I'm going to be back up and ready to go by August. I guess it just all depends on when I can get in there and get them to actually start preparing the right eye. We'll see. I sure hope so. But I mean, if you watch today's hearing, even like the judge is saying, it's going to be like a concert almost, where you got to go online and book your seats and you got to do all this stuff. So
He made it very clear that seats are at a premium. That's what he said. You know, it's I think that, you know, and you got to figure he you know, the prosecution made a good point, and they said, you know, there were 4 victims here. So, I mean, that's definitely, you know, going to add to their families are going to need seating and stuff like that. Obviously, you know, Brian Koberger's family, if they attend, are going to need seating. So it was kind of interesting to watch them actually talk about the seating situation and how that was going to work out.
Well, I'll tell you what, Judge Hippler was on top of that too, when he clearly stated Brian Koberger gets 4 seats for his immediate family. And when Ann Taylor says, well, what if we need an extra seat for one person for a couple of days? Judge Hippler just kind of shakes his head like, we'll see, but I doubt it. And that's when the prosecution stepped in and says, look, we got 4 victims' families here that all have the victims' rights advocates. And Hippler says, what, they all have their own? And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's not very understanding, because, normally you have, I guess you don't get a quadruple homicide that often.
Right.
But
right.
Counselors and advocates for the victims' families should not be limited. Now, I do understand the judge saying, hey, by the way, I'm not going to have 20 seats for all these advocates to be in the courtroom during the trial. They could wait outside if they need to. But yeah, it definitely sounds like those that want to get up to this trial, seating's not going to be easy to come by. And the courtrooms are not big in Ada County. I'm going to tell you now. I know they have the overflow room, and I know they're prepared to utilize that. But I mean, I don't want people to legitimately think that they're going to fit 500 people in this courtroom, because they're not.
No, no way. And he made it sound like they're going to have a separate room also.
Yeah, that's the overflow.
Right, right. So, I mean, that should help. But it was interesting to see, those are things that, a lot of us don't think about, is where are we going to see all these people? And, how is this all going to go down? So it's always interesting to watch, the inner workings of how everything's going to happen. I was kind of watching today, and I was thinking that, Hitler, in my opinion, he's definitely not Mr. Personality, but he kind of is juggling so many things all at once. I mean, he's even making his own schedule. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy to kind of watch the inner workings of how all this works.
Well, I'll tell you what, the man literally has a calendar in his head, because he could tell you what days he's taking off, what days are holidays, dude, right. I don't even know what tomorrow is. I don't know if it's a Thursday, a Friday, a Monday. I can't stay on top of it. And he knows the exact days that he needs off. And, well, if this is a holiday and the jury has to be sequestered here, well, we're going to work on that holiday. And I'm thinking, well, I'm glad this isn't my case, man, because,
right.
But it might be good to have a judge like that, because I've also had judges in some of my cases that wanted every other day off. So my case just got drawn out extra amount of time because they kept postponing hearings and things of that nature. So it might be good just to get this ramped up and get it moving. Now we got to wonder, set aside from even the alternative perp situation, which we're going to jump into that discussion here in a minute, because, I mean, that was the big thing that we were all expecting for the day. And of course, we're going to jump into that conversation. But with this new special prosecutor and the investigation that's going to go into this leak, I don't know exactly what your mindset of that is, but I truly see this only ending in a couple of ways. And that's going to be a delay in the trial process, because the judge has to ensure, one, he can either seat a jury correctly,
right,
or two, this case is going to be a mistrial. It's going to be dismissed. And then I don't know where you go from there. Like, I just don't know where you go from there, because if you can't try the case right now with a fair and impartial jury, what makes you think you're going to be able to do it 2 years from now? And does Brian Koberger legitimately have to sit for 2 years to try to figure that out?
Right. I mean, it could take a minute. If you look at a lot of the cases that I research, the trial, sometimes it takes 4 years, 5 years, sometimes it just happens that way. So it wouldn't be uncommon, I don't think.
Well, and that's what I tried to explain to people when this case was originally working its way into the courts. I said, guys, all of you guys that think that this is going to trial in the year, of 2023, that's not possible. 2024 is iffy, and people got all over me. That's 2 years. Of course it's going. Dude, I've sat in jail cells with people waiting 7, 8, 9 years to go to trial.
Right.
Obviously, these are very complex cases, but so is this one. This one is just crazy complex.
Very.
And I still don't think that the timetable of a 2025 trial is really all that happening. Like, I feel 2026 or 27, for some reason, something's going to pop up. And I think that it's going to be kind of a part of this alternative perp discussion. And I also think it's going to be the investigation of maybe prosecutorial misconduct with this evidence being leaked. I mean, legitimately, if things off of Brian Koberger's phone are actually leaked and are real and true and could affect this case, man, you got shit wheels on your hands at that point, because you tainted everybody's mind. And this is why I guess I'm so hard on the system. Like, I look at the system and people are like, well, you're just an ex-criminal, so you think like a criminal. You're always no, I've seen this. Like, I've seen this stuff play out. And I'm not saying I've endured it every single time personally, but these things happen.
Right.
And now where are we at? Now we see it. The judge recognizes it and literally had to put out an order for a special prosecutor to investigate this. With subpoena power, he has the ability to, make deals with people that if they tell on someone else, they won't be charged for things. I mean, this is a big deal. This is a big deal.
Well, I mean, for him to address it, because I was wondering if he was even going to address it. And like I said, I watched it this morning, and I watched it almost to the end, and I was wondering if it was going to be addressed. And then, of course, when I talked to you on the phone, you were like, he addressed it at the very end. And I thought, of course he did.
Well, and I got this gut feeling when he started making the comments about having a closed hearing prior to this hearing. That kind of led me to believe, okay, we can put 2 and 2 together here and know that the Dateline show just released after the last hearing, before this hearing.
Right.
And we've all said that, isn't it just always kind of funny that right before a Brian Koberger hearing, something more trickles out that just happens to not be in his benefit. And here was another instance of that. So, and I do see that Pete stopped into the house. I would type him a message, but I know he can't see and I can't see. So
we need to get him a braille on the comments there.
Hell, I need braille on the comments. What are you talking about?
I think that something, that I kind of felt like, I guess while I was watching this special, I kept, I kept thinking to myself that we were going to see an attempt to try to find some sort of connection. But I just kept seeing it seemed more like an attack on Brian Koberger's, his character. I mean, they talked to a lot of people that thought he was strange, but they didn't talk to the people who said that he was brilliant.
Right.
So it's one of those things where we're only looking at one side. And I kind of wanted to I just want to say something to Sylvia really quick. The leak that we're talking about right now is the cell phone footage that was leaked to Dateline. So basically the photos of the girls that were allegedly on Brian Koberger's phone, and the selfies, and who leaked these photos, where did they come from? Because Brian Koberger's phone should have been in evidence since 2022 when they apprehended him. So I just wanted to clear that up for Sylvia real quick. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I'm going to actually bring up, give me 1 second here. I'm going to, while you're kind of mentioning that, so we do have the document here. Let me see if I could do this a little better. I'm going to put myself behind an M.
All right.
Actually, I hit mute instead of stop my cam, so we'll do this properly. But I'm gonna zoom in on this. So this is actually the court order that Hitler put out today. It's for the document records hold. I actually which one do I have up here? I'm trying to see which one I put up. So this one's for the defense, but there's one specifically. I put up the wrong one. So bear with me for 1 second, Lucky. I'm going to put up the one that's actually for the prosecution. Maybe. If they would tell me which one was which, I'd be in a better place. Let me see which one this one is. Nope. Lucky, it's always hard to when you don't have your vision and you're trying to figure something out, it always makes you kind of look like a fool. You know what I mean?
You know, I've done things, you know, I'm still learning the whole how to do lives. I'm still learning the whole process. And so it seems like every live that I do, I always miss a step somewhere. I don't know, you know, it's one thing or another, but you know, it's nice that I can always go back and fix it.
Yeah, I mean it, that's the whole thing. Like I keep telling myself, this is literally fixable.
Right.
Um, no matter which way we do that. Do you see that okay on the screen?
I do. Yeah.
All right. So this is the document, the records hold put out today by Judge Hippler after the hearing when he discussed, um, the dissemination order being broken and that he was going to appoint the special prosecutor. It states on here, based on the sensitive information not previously publicly circulated that was reported during a recent Dateline TV program related to this case and the defendant Brian Koberger, it appears likely that someone currently or formerly associated with law enforcement or the prosecution team violated this court's non-dissemination order. Such violations not only undermine the rule of law, potentially by persons charged with upholding it, but also significantly impede the ability to seat an impartial jury and will likely substantially increase the cost to be borne by the taxpayers of Latah County to prosecute this case by extending the time it will take to seat a jury and potentially requiring a lengthy period of juror segregation. I can't even say the right words. So I definitely, I'm not a big one, Lucky, and I don't know about you, but I'm not a big one that goes through a lot of the documents, reads everything through, but I definitely recommend people take a venture over to the Idaho court docs and pull this up and give it a good read because it's quite interesting. But I think, Lucky, you and I can both agree, this clearly it references directly to the Dateline program.
Right.
And it definitely states within it, they're looking at someone currently or formerly associated with law enforcement or the prosecution team. And when you watch Dateline, that was quite obvious. It was quite obvious.
Right.
Well,
where would they get that info? Where would they get that information?
Well, and that's the thing, like, and you and I talked about this a little bit too. The information can be shoot or miss through conversation. Like, I get that. You can kind of put some stuff together and you can put out opinion, you can put out thought. But when you get down to legitimate photos and claim it to be not from Brian Koberger's Instagram account or some online social media account that you can go extract it from, or from a friend's phone that he messaged it to or shared it with, you distinctly said this is from Brian Koberger's cell phone.
Yeah.
Which we know that's in evidence.
As advertised.
Right. So that's in evidence. And before all this came out today, and I, like I told you, I was debating on doing content because many people are highly interested in knowing, what do people think, especially content creators? What do people think about this Dateline special, and how it either applies to the case and I was very hesitant to even talk about it because in my opinion, it was hearsay. And you and I, when we do our presentations, we clearly state the things that we talk about are our thoughts, our opinions. This is speculation. This isn't truth of fact. But I'm telling you right now, that Dateline show made it as if that was the holy grail of truth. Even discussing wounds to Ethan. And the one thing that I will say this, the one thing that made me stop, And I knew it the minute I heard it, Lucky, and I had to laugh. And I haven't talked about it, and I just held it in. But I knew it was all BS when I heard them say he could have brushed up against a chair, or he may have sat in it, leaving the blood stains, after taking the lives. And I'm thinking, so you don't know if he brushed up against it or if he sat down in the chair. You can't tell by the bloody stain in the chair. You don't know if he sat. Like, then why are you talking about it as if it's the holy grail of evidence? Why don't you just say there was possibly some blood that was found that could incriminate the suspect in the case a little bit more than people think? Instead, you want to clearly state, we don't know if he sat or brushed up against a chair. There's a pretty distinct difference between the two.
Right. This whole investigation, this whole case, I was just reading Trinity Q. She said the pics were blurred. They could be anybody. And that's something that I found really interesting when I was watching this special, is that, they said before they showed the pictures, they said that these photos have been enhanced for clarity. And I don't know you've seen the pictures. Obviously, we've all seen the pictures. There was no clarity involved in those pictures. But my question is, why do they always have to enhance things? Why do they always have to tweak things? Why do they always have to do things to what they're presenting to the public in order to make it better? But it only seems to make it worse.
Yeah.
It's like that throughout the whole case. We never get to see it just for what it is. It's always something has been enhanced or changed or manipulated. And, I would just like to see it for what it is. And I can't imagine that a picture taken on a cell phone is that blurry. I mean, why do you have to enhance it? I'm sure the picture was fine.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, a word, manipulation comes to mind. Typically, when I hear somebody say I'm enhancing something, like I'm enhancing the audio, I'm enhancing the quality of the picture, and I'm thinking to myself, in a case of this nature where someone's life is on the line, we need to go with the real, this is what it is picture. If it's grainy and you're unable to identify something, let's just use the idea of the vehicle. If you can't identify the Hyundai Elantra based upon the actual video footage you're looking at and the picture, you shouldn't use it, because if you enhance it, from the people that I know that do stuff like that, it can potentially change things.
It does change it, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like if you're manipulating it, you're changing it. So to me, AR, I'm a big outdoors person. So I hear a lot of Bigfoot stories, and I always make this joke that every photo that we see, every piece of video that we've seen in this case is basically a Bigfoot photo. It's that where it's all blurry. You just kind of see the big, blob, and they're trying to tell you that that's Bigfoot. And I feel like it's the same way in this case. Everything's blurry, everything's pixelated, everything is, needs to be manipulated. And I would just like to see it the way that it is.
That's just where I stand. If you're going to try somebody for a quadruple homicide to where potentially their life is on the line, you got to do it based upon the realness of what you have evidence wise. I mean, I don't think that, it's like you're going to charge somebody with this crime and claim they did it with a K-bar, yet you're going to go to trial and bring in a samurai sword and say it was kind of like this one, but it's not, but it kind of was.
Exactly like this. It's exactly like this, but different.
Right. And at the end of the day, everything that I look at, I take with a grain of salt, because I don't trust it. I don't trust the video footage from Linda Lane. I don't know if that's been manipulated. I don't know if that's real and true. I feel as though if that was real and true, the judge would have grabbed that a long time ago and shut that down, or at least put out some sort of documentation or comment in regards to that, to where it either just, this is what it is, it's real and true, this is the actual footage, this will be seen at trial, to just alleviate the thought process that it could have been changed or enhanced. But with nothing being said, not only the video, but the audio, the things that you hear,
Right.
can easily be changed. They can easily be changed. And that scares me when someone's life is on the line. I think you need to try people by the facts. And you just got gifted some memberships. So
Yeah,
that was very nice.
I was gonna say thank you to the snooper. I really appreciate that.
It's always great. It means a lot to us, the support that we get, Lucky. It's a blessing, and it's, I mean, it's unreal to me sometimes. I think you and I have that same agreement when we discuss this. It's like, when we came to this platform, we didn't know what to expect. We just thought we would give it a shot. We would hit the floor running and just try to talk and see what happened. And now here we are. What a great community. I know you talk so highly of your community and the enjoyment you get when you're doing your lives and be able to communicate with them. So that's always awesome.
I'm so attached. It's crazy because when you start a YouTube channel, first of all, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but you never think you're going to grow the way that my channel has grown, and I'm just so grateful for that. But you don't think that's going to happen. You kind of, to me, I just thought we were going to be a couple people sitting around talking about true crime. And then what happens is that you do start to grow and you start to build a community, and you really become attached to that community because, you see these people and you talk to these people, and it's really cool. It's something that you don't expect because you're thinking, well, I'm just going to start a channel on this platform and I'm going to do my thing. And that's what I'm going to do. But, everyone in this community is amazing, and you get attached, you remember people's names, and you remember, things that they've asked you, things that they've said. And it's really to me, it's my favorite part of this whole platform is just, the communication with everybody and just the community building. I didn't think that was going to be my favorite part when I first started my channel, but now that I'm a year and a half in, that is definitely my favorite part, is everybody who supports our channel and just the community of people who are so, I mean, they're just awesome. They're amazing.
What's crazy too, and I'll use there's a young lady here in the crowd with us tonight named Cheryl. And I'm going to use her kind of as a stepping point to what means so much. I built friendships, connections in this community that I never thought I would have with people that are very much like me. And this Cheryl is just an amazing woman. And I think in the discussions back and forth that her and I had very early on in building our little friendship, our relationship, we opened up in a trusting manner with each other, in a manner that we don't do with everybody else around us, because not only do we kind of have a few hiccups within the confidence and the feelings, that we have, but trust issues and things of that nature. And like she said, my soul friend. And literally we've connected that very way. And I never expected it. And she's been right alongside me and my wife. And, we talk everyday life. It's not even just about true crime. We talk everyday life. I get to know what her work day is like. I get to know the feelings that she's having through an everyday life. And I share those very things with her about mine as well. And that's not something I do with many. Lucky, we've had this conversation. I don't do that with very many people. And it's really crazy because we meet these people within our communities, um, and I can name off so many that I see in our chat. I can directly link exactly the conversations we've had, the meetings that we've had with each other. And, it's like, who would ever thought this would happen when we just come here and talk true crime and we build actual relationships, friendships that are going to last far longer than just the Idaho 4 case with Brian Colbert.
Right. Well, what did I tell you when you and I first talked, which I think both of us had kind of just started our channels on the platform. I wanted to say thank you, Denise. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you so much. And, the thing is, when you and I first started talking and we first started our channels, it was really, I think I remember telling you, I am not doing any lives. I'm not interested in doing lives. I just want to make my videos and just kind of do my thing. And I'm not interested in doing any lives. And, you kind of motivated me to do that. And, it's funny because I still kind of, you and Jen always took care of everything. I just showed up and started talking. So, I still have that. It's funny because before this live, I asked you, is Jen going to be there? Is Jen going to moderate? And I think that it's because, we have that trust and we have that, we have that friendship. And I think that, it's given me the confidence to do more lives and now to do members only lives. And it's not something that I ever thought that, that I would do. I want to say thank you to Connie thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's first of all, I gotta give a little shout out. My wife is at work today, but Jen truly does a lot of work for you and I both. Lucky.
She does.
She makes this possible in a way that I can't do this by myself. Even though right now I'm doing it by myself, I could have never got to this confidence level of being able to do this on my own. So I definitely want to give her a shout out and a thank you. And then obviously to our mods, Doodlebug has been with me for a long time. Her and I connected and built a good friendship. And just like so many here in, the chat, we've been able to do that. I did see somebody here. I'm trying to catch these. Norma, I see that you have a question for me. You're more than welcome to ask that question if you would like. Lucky, if we can keep an eye out for Norma.
Sure.
She says she has a question. If she wants to pop that in there, I'll do my best to answer that. If it's anything incriminating that could put some cuffs onto my hands, and I'm going to plead the fifth immediately.
Right.
But go ahead and definitely ask that.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it too. It's funny. Susan Russo says, "Yep, I remember you saying that, Lucky." And she's been on my channel from the beginning. I mean, she's been on my channel for a really long time. But if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, then that's that was kind of the mindset that I had when I first started.
Yeah, I do remember the conversations back and forth. We literally started in the comments on each other's videos. We worked our way into, one of us emailed the other one about something. And then Pete really kind of unlocked the opportunity when Pete did the interviews, when he interviewed you first, and then he contacted me and said he wanted to do an interview with me. And that opened up the door to where we had a little more of an conversation. And then you and I decided to go behind the scenes and do a video where we talked Idaho 4 and did a recorded video together. And it just kind of sprawled from there and opened the door and moved forward. But now today, legitimately, we talk on the phone a couple of times a week, if not more. And, we have big plans. So hopefully we can bring, to the table of in-person lives and other things that we'll be able to accomplish. But just so that you know, I'll keep an eye out for that question. I haven't seen it come through.
I'm watching for it too. I'm watching this chat because everybody is kind of everybody's putting out there when they began watching my channel. That's awesome, Ren Henniger, I want to say. Since 3,000 subscribers. I mean, a lot of the names that I'm seeing in this chat, a lot of you guys have been with me from the beginning, and I appreciate you guys so much. And
dude, I remember you when you were below 1,000.
Yeah.
We were both below 1,000 subs, and we were encouraging each other. And before you knew it, we both just blew up and just started growing pretty quick. I believe, Norma, this is probably a question here, Lucky, and I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll let you take the stage and give your initial answer to this, and then I'll kind of follow with you. I thought when they went in front of the judge for a warrant, they had to have something like a witness and so on and so on after they arrest. With that, can they change what they've said to get that?
That's a good question, but I don't think they can change it necessarily. What do you think, AR? I mean, it seems odd that if you're going to get a warrant for something that you would be able to change it after the fact.
So I think this case is showcasing a big issue that we have when it comes to arrest affidavits. A lot of people really take an arrest affidavit as if it is the ultimate facts of the case. And I tried to really present that very early on, that these are assumptions and theories that put together the thought process of law enforcement for them to be able to request an arrest warrant. Now, when it comes to actual warrants, let's say for Brian Koberger's Amazon click history or for his phone records, law enforcement can step before a judge, which in this case was Susan Marshall, and they can request warrants based upon provable reasoning to get that warrant. It doesn't have to be so-called witness testimony or evidence. It just legitimately has to be a reasonable request based upon, I want to say evidence, but it's really not, because they're requesting the ability to get the evidence that they need, but they have to have a firm reasoning to go after those things. So no, it doesn't come down to actual witnesses. And can it change? Look, this is one of the biggest discussions I think this case Lucky's going to have forever and always, is that original PCA is garbage.
Straight trash. That original PCA is trash. I mean, if you go back and look at it now compared to the information that we have, it's bad. Thank you, Delta Firefly. I really appreciate that.
I think that even outside of that, I mean, just everything about that. I mean, we can still jump back into the IGG. I mean, there's so much we could talk about when it comes to this case that's legitimately mind-boggling on one side, but then at the end of the day, you just shake your head and say, how's that stand? How does that not? I mean, again, I'm going to bring up the fact that we went through the motions to suppress hearings, the motion in limine hearings, and not one was favorable to the defense. Not one.
Right.
Yet the arrest affidavit in this case was complete bogus information. Now, could they potentially back that arrest warrant by stating they have 23 potential occurrences that Brian Koberger was within 100, whatever it is, of the home? They could, but that wasn't a part of their arrest warrant. I
feel like it was a working. Wasn't that what it ended up being called, as a working PCA? It just kind of kept evolving into something different, because I think, and I believe it's in the PCA, and if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments, but I believe in the PCA that is where we heard about the frozen shock phase, isn't it?
Yeah,
Dylan.
Man, it's so hard to figure out where we heard what now, because I mean it comes from every angle possible. You don't know if it comes from the social media aspect of it, if it comes from the mainstream media aspect of it, whether it comes from documents through the court. I mean, we're 3 years into this now, and it started with a lie at the podium, with law enforcement not being upfront and honest about what was transpiring in Moscow. And I think today they're still weeding their way through that. And that's why this gag order on this case was ridiculous.
I agree. I think it hurt the case.
I know that the defense motioned for it. I know they did it right from the get-go. The defense did that. And I'm wondering if their reasoning for that was initially trying to protect Brian Koberger's potential spectrum disorder and the things of that nature. Was that where that originated? Is they needed to protect him in that sense? But at the end of the day, this just step by step has become a bigger and bigger failure when it comes to properly presenting a case to the public. And I think that's been very detrimental to this case. And if they had just gotten ahead of things by not having that dissemination order and allowing the fact to come out, I think a lot of these theories could have been squashed and a lot of the negativity right off the bat.
I agree. I wanted to answer a question real quick from Bazem. They said, why do you guys think that Brian Koberger hasn't been able to provide the K-bar knife and the sheath that he bought on Amazon? And, you know, that was, if you watch my channel, that was a question I asked, and I wish I had an answer, because I would like to know that myself, you know, and that was one of the first things that I thought about when we heard about this information about the Amazon purchase. And that was one of my first questions was, you know, was Brian Koberger able to provide this knife to law enforcement when they asked him for it? So that's a great question. I wish I had an answer for you, but I have no idea why he cannot provide that K-bar. I have the same question. So it's a really good question.
And that leads into a good thing to quickly discuss as well, because I know, I don't know if you got to see it or not, but Judge Hippler had a discussion today in the hearing about a knife that needs to be put into a display case during the trial. And I kind of want to break it to people out there. That knife that's going to be in that display case is not the murder weapon from this crime scene. I want people to understand that now.
Right.
That's going to be a piece of evidence that's going to be showcased by the prosecution for the members of the jury to be able to understand what this knife looks like, what it's built like, the potential size of it, what the blade. They're going to utilize this as an exhibit to be able to showcase the damage that could potentially be done by the weapon that they're claiming committed this crime. Why that's got to be in the display case, Lucky, I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I mean, I guess maybe in this courtroom, you got to be overly protective of all things, especially in today's society. You got to keep weapons out of people's hands.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But that's not the way they would present the actual weapon utilized in this crime to the jury. That's just not how it would happen.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it is odd that they are going to need to put it in a display case, but I guess I understand. I mean, that makes sense. It's probably sharp. I mean, it shouldn't be hard for them to find a K-bar. It's pretty common.
And I think that they're doing that when it's not being utilized in testimony or being showed to the jury. I think that it's going to be kept in that display case and locked away, you know, unless it's being used at that moment. Because I guarantee you, there's no doubt in my mind, the prosecutor is going to want to take that knife and walk it over right in front of that jury box and maybe even set it down on the railing and let them hear that metal hit that wood to show how heavy that is.
Right.
They're going to want to showcase the power of that weapon. And I don't think you get the what's the point of showing it to them? I mean, I guess visually you would see the size, but that
Well,
doesn't give you the emphasis at trial that you would want.
no, but no, very true. I think that, the thing is with the K bar, it could go either way because, if they're going to put it on display to show the size of this knife and how heavy it is, like you said, I agree. I think they're going to put that on the counter and you're going to be able to hear the weight of it. But that could also work in the defense's favor because, one person allegedly was wielding this knife, and a K-bar is not a light knife. I mean, I use a K-bar knife when I go camping. I use it to knock branches off of, wood and stuff like that. It's a heavy knife, and it's not really, it wouldn't be my knife of choice. I can tell you that, that's for sure.
Yeah, but they're going to utilize it to show that this is the devastating type of weapon that could create these very scenarios where 4 people brutally lost their lives, and they've got to make that impact. And I think you have to show it. But the thing
I
about
agree.
it, if this was the knife that was utilized in the crime, they would never. I mean, you would still have the blood on it. You would still have the chips in the metal. You would. So yeah, I guess that you would potentially put that into a display case, but I just don't see it. You take pictures of those types of things and you put them up on the big wall. You don't bring the actual weapon into the courtroom. But in this case, nothing would surprise me. Lucky, nothing would surprise
I
me.
agree. I agree. I mean, I think it would be good to have a visual, to see what it is. Just because most of us know what a K-bar knife is because I mean, I have one. I'm sure you know what a K-bar knife is, and I'm sure that everybody in the chat has researched or seen a K-bar knife or owned a K-bar knife. So, I think it would be good to have a visual. They're very capable. They're definitely capable, but I think it would be good just to demonstrate the size, and while we're on the K-bar knife, I kind of have to ask, because, Steve Gonsalves said that an investigator told him that this weapon was a powerful weapon, that it was a brutal weapon, and that it was a weapon that whoever owned it was proud of it. They were probably proud of this weapon. And that's always stuck with me because to me, that's not describing a K-bar knife. I mean, a K-bar knife could be brutal in the right hands, but I wouldn't exactly call it someone's prized possession. I mean, they're made in bulk. You know what I mean? They're not custom by any means.
I think you and I had the discussion, and I still stand pretty firmly in my feeling that I at the end of the day, think that this was a handcrafted weapon built specifically, maybe not to commit the crime, but it's the type of weapon that would be built as if it was the type of weapon to commit this crime. It was handcrafted. It was uh, devastating of a weapon, but it just makes me think of something that would be you sit down and you actually custom design it, and there's it's just made for this. Where a K bar, man, you can go to your local Walmart in many places in the country and just buy a K bar.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
they're
I
they're they're made in bulk. It's not a custom knife by any means.
I mean, I just for this kid to be this stupid to buy a K bar knife on Amazon when you could potentially go to your local pawn shop and pick one up and
Absolutely.
just pay cash for it.
Right. Right. That's what and that's what I've been thinking all along is that you can find a K-bar knife in any surplus store, any pawn shop. I mean, you could just go pay cash for it and it would never trace back to you. So, you know, to me, it is a very capable weapon, but I just don't I the way that the way that it was described by Steve Gonsalves, I've just never had it pictured in my mind as a K-bar knife.
I'll tell you what, a weapon that comes to my mind, you see clearly in the pictures with the young ladies in a watermelon. that machete looks pretty damn devastating to me. And
Yeah.
that's a wild. If you just have that thing sitting around your house and people are going to say, "Oh, it's fake, it's not real." No, that was pretty damn real.
The machete.
Yeah.
Well, and with that long blade and with that long blade, man, you can get a lot of power behind that. You know,
Yeah.
if you're swinging a machete, you know, as compared to a K-bar knife, if you're swinging a machete, you can get a lot of power behind that weapon and do some really serious damage.
I mean, and that's one thing people need to think too. They need to realize the prosecution never stated this was a one weapon crime. They
Right.
just stated that they had a piece of evidence to a K-bar knife that they had as evidence that potentially had DNA on it. They never said that's the only weapon that was utilized to commit this crime. And I know so many people argue that, oh, no, there's no other weapon. You know, it's funny because Hunter went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife when he entered the home before calling 911. What do you think? He went in and got a steak knife or a butter knife out of the drawer? Or do you think he legitimately got a knife? Like,
Right.
why
Right.
did you go to the kitchen if you were going to grab a butter knife? Like, I know that's not what you did. So that's a conversation. Obviously, I think that I'm interested in seeing when we get obviously to trial. I want to hear about what potentially could be the weapon of choice or weapons of choice. Did he grab something? Or I shouldn't say he, it could be a he, she, whoever's involved in this. Did they grab something from within the home? Did they bring something with them? You know, and that's why I think that a lot of this stuff that's leaked out in regards to like the kill kits and things of that nature, you got to be very careful, um, you know, in those types of discussions because you don't know if this stuff was just legitimately already in the home.
Right. Well, and anything could be used as a weapon. I mean, they could have used a golf club. You know, what one of Ethan's golf clubs could have been used. There could have been anything could be used as a weapon if it's, you know, in capable hands.
Yeah, I've seen some of the oddest things turned into or used as a weapon that you would never expect. Trust me. Um, you know, and sliding into another conversation, you know, that happened today, it is very evident, Lucky, that Judge Hippler sees Dylan and Bethany as victims in this crime. He clearly states it.
He did.
And I know many of us have so many questions when it comes to these two ladies, and I'm still upset that I feel as though law enforcement and the prosecution threw Dylan just completely under the bus with all of this. I think they could have done this in a whole different manner. And you were gifted another
Yeah. Thank you,
membership there,
T.
so very thankful
I
for that.
appreciate you a lot, T. Thank you so much.
All you lucky people getting gifted memberships to Unfiltered Lucky to be able to join in on those lives that he's doing. I've been begging him to get me a membership, and I've been yelling at Google Pay to not. Oh, one
Well,
day.
you know, and this is the thing is that, you know, I had, since I do member only lives, we don't gift lives we don't gift memberships in my lives
Right.
because everybody's always a member. So I'm still trying to figure out how, from what I'm hearing, they give me a certain amount of lives that I can give away as gifts, and
Get
I'm
10
still
a
trying
month.
to figure out how I can do that.
So let's do it right now. You want to give away 5 right now?
Let's do it. Let's give
Let's
away
do
5
that.
right now.
So what I need you to do is you keep StreamYard, but you go open up a second screen with your YouTube.
Okay, I'm on my YouTube right now.
Okay, now you're on your live on your YouTube.
Yep.
Okay, do you see down below your chat? You see the little dollar bill with the dollar sign?
Right.
Click on it.
Okay.
I gotta remember what this looks like. See, this is always where isn't it nice to have Jen right now, where she just like walks us through this? You should see on the very bottom of that where it says membership gifting.
I don't have that on mine.
You should have super stickers, super chat, membership, and membership gifting.
I have super stickers, super chat, and that's it.
So you don't even have membership or membership gifting?
Nope.
How is that possible?
I don't know. That's why I've been trying to figure this out, because I would love to give away. I would love to give away all of my memberships.
What we'll do is we'll do that when Jen gets back. She's got to help you turn on your membership gifting, so we'll do that when she gets back.
All right.
But you know, kind of back to the DM thing. I know many of us, obviously, we don't like the fact that the 911 call took 8 hours to place, and there's so many questions and so many discussions. But it's quite clear right now that Judge Hippler, he is on the these are victims train, even setting aside. I love this today. This I'm sorry, but I just kind of had to look at my wife, shake my head, and just I didn't know if I was laughing or in disbelief when he says we're going to reserve the two of them seats in the courtroom, as victims should all be able to have seats in the courtroom. But I'm pretty sure they're not going to want to use them. And I'm thinking, don't they have to be there as witnesses? Aren't they testifying? Because 1 minute he was saying how they were going to close their testimony to where it was only audio. You wouldn't be able to see them. You would only be able to hear them, which tells me they're going to be testifying. But didn't they just make a whole long spectacle about Brian Koberger's family potentially being in the courtroom when they have to testify? They had to figure out how to be able to do that. And it was all this big discussion, yet you don't have a problem with Bethany and Dylan potentially sitting in the courtroom when they're actual witnesses to the crime. Like, they're testifying to seeing the perpetrator.
Right.
And you're going to just give them a seat in the courtroom.
Yeah.
What am I missing, Lucky? What am I missing?
And he's saving 2 seats for them. So, right. I mean, he's setting 2 seats aside for them from what he said in the hearing today.
Yeah, so, no matter what, they've got seats, whether they want to use them or not, they've got them. But I just don't understand. Okay, Koberger's family has to go through a whole fight to be able to be in the courtroom with their son and brother during this trial. But those two have seats. Aren't they testifying to more than anything Brian Koberger's family could potentially testify to? Like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
No, I agree. I agree. When I heard him say that today, it made me think, because I did hear him say that. He made it very clear, that he believes that they are victims as well.
And that's one thing I want to ask you. It's something that you and I haven't talked about, and it kind of stems from this Dateline, whatever we want to call this show. But potentially Brian Koberger called his father 2 hours after committing this crime. Like, literally, it stated he got home, around like 5:30 in the morning after his drive around the universe or whatever after the crime. He made it home about 5:30, and they're saying that he called his father at about 6 a.m.
Yeah, they said his phone call. They said he called him 3 times, and the longest phone call lasted 37 minutes. I think they said.
What could that conversation potentially be like? Like, think about that conversation. And I'm only saying it if this is the perp of the crime. If Brian Koberger is the perp of the crime, is this legitimately going to be one of the very first time a quadruple homicide suspect calls dad an hour after committing a crime like this?
Well, and, KB just said, so it was 9 a.m. Pennsylvania time.
Right, 6 a.m. Brian Koberger time.
Yep. Yeah. So it was. I mean, well, and it's crazy because Dylan and Bethany, they called their folks as well too.
Yeah, I mean,
everybody called their folks.
These college kids and everybody at the beginning. If you remember at the beginning, remember how everybody says college kids sleep till noon or later all the time. Especially after being out partying and drinking and doing all, they sleep in all the time. Yet all these kids were up before 8 a.m. making phone calls to mom and dad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I would be asleep all day if I drank 10 White Claws and some champagne and a gallon of Borg. I
I
mean, I
think
feel
I'd
like
be,
I'd be out for 3 days.
yeah, I'd probably be asleep all day if I committed a quadruple homicide where I was running all over the house and speed demon it all over 2 states. I would probably be pretty tired too, not calling daddy an hour after the fact. But I'm just saying, what's that conversation like? Hey, Dad, just thought I'd give you a call. I know it's early and it's Sunday, and you're probably thinking about going to, out to eat or church with mom. But I just wanted to give you a call. I know it's 6 a.m. over here, and I don't want you to worry about me. Did you guys get that selfie pic that I sent you where I look like I'm pale white and, just I got the top button of my shirt done? I just thought I'd let you all know.
Yeah. I mean, well, that photo, there's still something about that photograph that it just doesn't sit right with me. There's something about I think that photo was doctored by the media. I think that was another enhanced photo. I
Yeah,
think
that's
it was
absolutely
changed.
that. Dude, I look at that photo. He looks like he weighs 100 pounds. Like he's itty bitty in that photo. Think about how little he looks. Um, and then look at his perp walk in Pennsylvania when he was arrested with these pretty good sized guards around him, and he towers them and he's bigger than them. That's
Yeah.
not the same build, man. That's not the same build.
Well, he's the ever changing. If you notice, I mean, he looks different in almost every photo. There's some photos where he just looks real goofy, and then there's some photos where he looks really intense, and then there's some photos where he looks real skinny and sick, and then there's some photos where he looks completely healthy. So I feel like every time we see a photo of Brian Koberger, it's a different look, and maybe it's because they're enhancing all of his photos.
I think that could potentially be true. I really do. And I want to make a kind of a clear cut statement here, real quick. When I discussed Brian Koberger calling his family at 6 a.m. in the morning, the reason why I'm saying to me that that's odd is I don't see a quadruple homicide individual doing that. I have no doubt that there are individuals that get up early in the morning and call their mom and their dad, or especially somebody like Brian Koberger that potentially has not lived away from home, that's relatively new, being all the way across the United States. Of course, I think he would call his parents, and maybe that's just a good time to reach mom and dad, is pretty early in the morning, and I have no problem with that. I'm just saying I find it extremely odd that that would transpire an hour after getting home from a quadruple. I think his adrenaline rush from what just happened would still be too overwhelming to act normally on the phone with mom or dad. Just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one thing that kind of gets lost in the whole in translation is, when we're watching it on TV and our computers and our phones and stuff like that, you know, we sometimes we tend to forget that whoever committed this crime experienced the adrenaline dump of their life. I mean, there's no way that someone went into this house and took the lives of 4 people and did not experience an adrenaline dump that would probably take most people out. I mean, adrenaline dumps can actually make you immobile. They affect your body in a big way. It's something that in firearms training, it's something that we train a lot with because a lot of people don't realize, they think, well, somebody breaks into my house, I've got this firearm, I'm going to protect myself, and it's just going to go down like it does on TV. And it doesn't. When you're about to take someone's life, I don't care who, I mean, you're going to have an adrenaline dump. There probably are those people that can stay nice and calm and cool, but I would have to say that that's probably not their first time.
Well, dude, I mean, coming from my background, trust me, I remember the uncontrollable heartbeat. I remember the trying to get my wind, trying to catch my breath. And I'm not talking about because I ran or it's just the overall nature of when you've committed a crime that you're now, and obviously a quadruple homicide, you're on the run. Like,
Right.
you got to get gone. You got to disappear. And you got to watch over every angle of your shoulder that you possibly could, because you don't know if you're caught or not, especially if you walk past Dylan Mortensen on the way out the door, knowing that there's a survivor in that home and you left a potential piece of evidence in the home as you left, to the point that you maybe even went back at 9 o'clock in the morning to try to find said piece of evidence. Dude, your heartbeat and your thought process and your capability to talk is just unfathomable to people that have never been in that situation. I mean, even me, just like when I did something stupid, committing just a burglary, it takes you a while to wind down because you don't know if you're caught or not. You don't know if you got away with it or not until time has passed. So
Right.
I mean, I just,
It's insane. You know, I talked to a guy the other day, and this guy is a big firearm guy. And, you know, we always say, you know, you never hope that you never want to be in a position where you have to use that, but you want to be capable if you do. And one of the things, I talked to a guy a while back, and he was telling me that he had to protect his home against two home intruders. And this guy has been a firearms guy for a long time. Never, always, you know, of course, trained on the range, never really, you know, never been in any trouble or anything like that. Never had to use his firearm against someone. Well, he had two home intruders, and he had to use his firearm to protect his home. And he told me that after it was all over, after it was all said and done, that he couldn't use his legs. That he said, I just couldn't even stand on my legs. You know, everything that came over me at that time just paralyzed me for a short amount of time. So you never know how people are going to react. And, you know, I can't imagine somebody doing this for their first time is going to start out with a quadruple homicide.
at the end of the day, you know, one of the questions I have, let's just for a moment just think Brian Koberger is the culprit. He's the one that did it. It would potentially be his very first crime of obviously this nature, but maybe any type of violent crime whatsoever in life. How would he know how to react to the amount of blood this would have been? I mean, people's reaction to violent crimes is different for everyone. I mean, each and every person handles these things differently. Like my wife once told me, and I mean, it's not a great thing, but she just said that I handle a lot of these types of things very unemotionally. And she asked me why I thought that would be. And I said, I have no idea. It's just, you know, blood doesn't mean anything to me. Like I've had open wounds that most people make sick to their stomach. And I'm just like, whatever. I don't know. People have just said that when it came to these types of things, I was unemotional, but that doesn't mean that I could commit that crime, because I wouldn't know at the end of the day how I would react at the end of the day to blood being everywhere. And I'm the type of, I don't like to see people in pain. Like I have this big heart that wants to see the better of people. I don't want to see people hurting. I don't want to
Right.
see you break your foot. And I definitely don't want to see you injured to the point you're on the way to the hospital or anything of that nature. So, I mean, death would even be worse. I've seen it and I don't want to see it, but you know, how would Brian react? And a lot of people are going to say, well, now you see it. This is how Brian reacts. But nobody saw how anybody that committed this crime reacted. And I don't know. I just kind of have a thought process in the back of my head. Somebody should have a explanation when it comes to why he would be able to handle these things so easily for a first timer, because it's not this easy to handle it as a first timer. I mean, even burglarizing a house, the first time you do it, you soil your pants, you're rushing, you're trying to get out of there. And that's not even a crime that literally affects people's lives. Or the carnage like this is literally stealing a wallet and your heart's beating so hard. And so I can only imagine. I mean,
Well, that's the thing, is that you don't know how you're going to, I don't think anybody would know how they're going to react in that situation, and I have a hard time believing that, that just one person ran in this house and took the lives of 4 people. Sometimes I think that, we do so much research, and we're so close to this crime because we have been, picking this case apart for 2 years, over 2 years. And so I think that sometimes we have to remind ourselves that this was 4 people. This was a quadruple homicide. I mean, there's probably people who have committed violent crimes who couldn't commit this crime. I've always said that this takes a certain type of person. This would take the type of person that has zero compassion, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that opens up the door to another conversation, which now is the alternative perp discussion that we knew today was supposedly the day it was going to be discussed in the courtroom, where the defense was going to bring to the table. Now, to me, I've been back and forth on this, Lucky, where, like I've told you, I felt as though they were going to be discussing a theory based alternative perp, not a direct link. But it definitely sounds, by the way it was discussed today in the courtroom. They provided a proffer today. Well, not today, but they provided the proffer to Judge Hippler. They're distinctly naming somebody. It's very clear.
Yeah.
Their alternative perp or perps have a name. So it's not a theory that they're trying to create, because if you remember, and I've done some content on it, but I've also discussed it with random people, including yourself. We talk about the alternative perp to prove Brian Koberger didn't commit the crime. It's just an innocent direction of conversation. Brian Koberger's not the one. We don't know who did it, but it's not Brian Koberger. That's an innocent alternative perp defense. Whereas it's clear, and Taylor and Massoff, which I love seeing at Massoff emphatically sit in her chair when discussing what day that they could do it at 12:30. And she says, I'm heavily involved in the alternative perp discussion.
She did say that. Yeah. During the scheduling, she wanted to make sure that she was there.
Yeah, she's definitely on top of that. Like, I'm directly involved in this, like more than you can imagine. But it's clear they're not putting up a theory. They're not putting up the Brian Koberger didn't commit this. We don't know possibly who did. There just happens to be some random this or that around the crime scene. They're coming in with they're firing at people. This is who we think did it. Now, of course, Judge Hippler made it quite clear. I think that we all need to pay attention to the fact he says, hey, by the way, I have your proffer here. Next time you need to include the evidence for this, which I'm glad that he gave the defense the time frame to be able to do that, because he could have potentially shut it down right there. But he opened that door to the June hearing, which gives them plenty of time now. You got a month.
Right. And I agree. I agree. I felt the same way. I was glad that he seemed receptive to it. Now he seemed like he's like, you better bring the goods, but he was open to it. So I was glad to see that.
He did make the statement. It's clear. I know where he's heading with this, where he clearly stated that he doesn't feel like this is going to be admissible. He thinks it's highly objectionable, which to me means they could be on the right path to something here if it's fluffing some feathers, because if they weren't on the right path, he would have shut this down immediately. Like, I really feel as though if they had offered this proper and not provided the evidence and didn't make this clear as day what their intentions were, or who they were going after, he could have shut it down today, would have been done and over. We'd have been heading to Brian Koberger's trial with no alternative purpose, obviously in sight. That door is still open.
Right.
That door is still open. And I think there's a reason. I think
Hey,
he saw something.
This is just a side note, but this is kind of beside the point. But do you remember when Judge was ready to go to trial like a year and a half ago? It's funny because when I go through my research, and I go back through all of my photos and all of my videos and all of the paperwork and all of my research. And I'll tell you all, I mean, I could pull it. I print everything out. I don't do well researching on my phone or researching on a computer. I literally print out everything that I research because I just process it better. But when I go back through all of my photos and all of my research, it's so crazy how far we've come in a year and a half compared to now, and I was thinking, I don't know if you remember, but Judge back in Latah County, he was ready to go to trial right now. And I think about that now, and I think that's so crazy to even think about.
Well, and to add to that, because you're absolutely right. I mean, Judge wanted to just steamroll this into a trial, probably because he was retiring. I mean, he was out the door.
Right.
So, I mean, he was ready to do this. But for all the people out there now, I don't like using the words Proberger and Gilter and this and that, but for the people that legitimately feel as though Brian Koberger is guilty of this crime, they still present the very conversation. Why did he waive a speedy trial? Why did he waive a speedy? I think it's obvious. I think it's quite obvious why he waived a speedy trial. I don't know if Brian Koberger's involved or not involved in this case. And I've been very clear. I think there's a potential he has, at the idea of me saying minimum, he has some knowledge of something to do with this case. I don't know what that is. If he maybe is even directly involved in the case, I don't know. But you can't get steamrolled at any point in time when there's potential that you can put on a defense. And I think this proffer by Ann Taylor Massoff and the defense team in Brian Koberger's defense to be given to Hippler, and you have to really think in your mind how strict Hippler is as a judge. I mean, this guy shuts everything down for the defense.
Yeah, he does.
And they're attacking this alternative perp with names, which to me shows that they legitimately are standing by their thoughts and their feelings that Brian Koberger did not commit this crime. When they stood in that courtroom and said Brian Koberger is innocent, they legitimately believe that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that shows to me, I mean, I really believe that the defense team believes in their client. I really do. And I don't feel as though Ann Taylor would, put her reputation on the line. And I don't think that Massoff would, to me, Massoff seems like she's no nonsense. Massoff seems to me like she's a little firecracker. That's somebody I would want on my team if I was in this situation.
Yeah, I made it quite clear, like Massoff would be my prime pick for an attorney. If I got to handpick somebody that I've seen in my lifetime as a lawyer, she would be pretty high up on that list of everybody I've seen through the years. But, she works on the federal level of things. She's more than a firecracker. She's a legitimate attorney that is well qualified for death penalty cases and things of this nature, because she's a just I'm going to prove it. I don't have to theorize about it. And I think that was clearly stated too in the April 9th hearing that I attended, when both her and Ann Taylor said, we will have the evidence for this, not we'll try to get it, or we're investigating it at this point, or this or that. They clearly say we will have that evidence for you. And that's why we're going to proffer this, and we're going to move forward with this alternative perp defense. And well, I don't know what they're on to, man. I don't know if it's a single person. I don't know if it's a group of individuals. I don't know what it is. I do want to clearly give my opinion in the fact I don't think it has Dylan's name on it, and I don't think it has Bethany's name on it, because the judge would be a little more hesitant to come out as direct and saying victims if he was seeing their information in these documents from the defense as a potential perp. He would be pretty careful in the wording of things he said, and he made it quite clear he's coming to the table. They're victims of this crime. They're not part of this crime. They're victims. So I have to agree with a couple of people that I've seen discuss that and give their opinion. I agree with that. I agree. They're not going to be let off the hook for the 911 call. They may be victims of the entirety of the crime, but there are always going to be questions in regards to their actions and the lack of compassion for people dying within the home with no phone call to be made to help them. Yeah. But this judge isn't, he ain't letting that go.
Well, and that's something that I always say is that, how you can't overlook their actions. I don't like to think that two 20-year-old college students, two 20-year-old college girls were a part of this crime. I don't like to think that at all. And I've said that in many of my videos. I try to be very careful about how I approach the whole situation with Dylan and Bethany, because I don't like to think that these two young girls could be a part of this. But their actions are questionable. Now, I'm not saying that makes them a part of this crime. I'm just saying that we still have to question their actions because they're odd, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, I put myself into the stance of if I was a father of one of the young kids that laid on the floor dying, how would I react to a 911 call being left out into the air for 8 hours? And then on top of that, how upset would I be with the crime scene crew that took an additional 5 hours to even investigate the crime scene? And there's so much to this, man, that would just make me explode with I got temperament issues. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I've admitted in my past, I had a very narcissistic outlook on a lot of things. So I wouldn't handle this well as a father. I don't think you would. I don't think most fathers would.
No, not at all. And I've said many times, I probably would be doing the same things that Steve Gonsalves is doing. Hopefully I would have the open mind to make sure that, because to me, the most important thing would be catching the right person and convicting the right person. Because to me, if I had my doubts, then that would weigh on my mind pretty heavily, because, if you convict the wrong person, and it does happen, we've seen it happen. I mean, look at the West Memphis 3. They spent 20 years in prison and they were wrongfully convicted. And that's 3 people. So it does happen. And the thing is, as a father, my main concern would be that the right person was held accountable, because that's who I would want, is the right person.
I think, though, in what I've gotten to know of you, Lucky, in our conversations, you would be a little more reserved than what I've seen out of Steve Gonsalves, because I think in the back of your mind, the interviews and the discussions about the case where you're potentially giving false information, things that you don't fully understand about the case, things you weren't clearly explained by the prosecution or law enforcement, these details that you just don't know the actual facts. I think you would be pretty careful in those conversations. I know me. I seem to be a pretty vocal person. I seem to talk a lot, but I think people that get to know me pretty well know I'm pretty reserved in a lot of things, and I don't talk well. I seem to go into a shell, and I think in a situation like this, I would do the same thing. I wouldn't be the leader of the pack to get the voice heard and things of that nature, but one of my main reasonings of that is I don't want to give false information that could lead to a mistrial, a dismissal. The person that's potentially on the burner for my loved one's loss of life, I wouldn't want to impede that and cause. And where we're sitting right here, right now, in the way that Judge Hippler has to attack what's happening right here, right now, this could potentially end with nobody being convicted of this crime.
A good point. You make a really good point. And I agree, because, you know, I don't want to see anyone get off on a technicality if they did commit this crime. But that's a very good point, you know, is especially right now, it seems like I don't think Judge Hippler's messing around. You know, he got that order out pretty quick.
Let me ask you this though, because you said you don't want to see anybody get let out of obviously a sentencing based upon the fact of a technicality.
Right.
What about being convicted by a technicality, a tip instead of the truth? Like instead of having to show the actual truth of the IGG and everything that's happened in this case, in that technicality that you don't even have to tell the truth of how you got to Brian Coburn?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this, and I agree 100%. I mean, to me, the investigation, in my opinion, I understand that there's probably certain aspects of this investigation that they have to keep under wraps. And I get that. But to me, an investigation, this needs to be transparent, because like we talked about the other day, you know, how do you explain to the jury how you even got to this suspect? How do you even explain to the jury if you can't explain the process that you used with the IGG? Then how are you going to explain to the jury how you came to this defendant? I mean, are you basically just going to say, well, you're just going to have to take our word for it? I mean, that seems to be the way they do it in Idaho. But in my opinion, I feel as though you should have to show every step of how you conducted this investigation. You know,
Especially in
they're
that
familiar.
case,
You know,
right?
the feds know that they're going to have to go to court, or the feds know that the state is going to have to provide, you know, information about this investigation. The feds don't care. They're not involved in it yet. So, you know, why would they care? They kind of drop this in the state's lap. So to me, it's kind of like they know that the prosecution is going to need something to prove how they came to Brian Koberger, in my opinion.
Yeah, so many things like it doesn't sit well when the grand jury indictment is under question to the point that a judge opens up a grand jury indictment for the defense to review and argue. That doesn't happen. The IGG situation is just a mess. And what I find to be funny is the person that the prosecution has chosen to take the stand to discuss this so-called tip to Brian Koberger is Payne. This is the Mr. I do not recall. I don't remember. I don't know how that happened. I don't know when wait, you're the one that's going to take the stand and explain the tip to the jury. Not
Right.
that's like the laughing stock of laughing stocks.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Well, I don't really feel as though Brett Payne had a whole lot to do with this investigation. I think that's why he doesn't remember, and that's why he doesn't recall. And, he doesn't really seem to know a whole lot about the investigation.
No, it's simple. Brett Payne was, hey, go get me a cup of coffee, Mr. Payne, and bring that back into double. I mean, uh, it, it he legitimately was not a part of the investigation. He just sat in the room and filed the affidavits for warrants when he was told to do so. He
Right.
most likely didn't write any of them himself. And he clearly states that when he says, oh, they helped me do this, they helped me do that. No, you're photoshopped and pasted stuff isn't you writing an affidavit. But I mean, at the end of the day, you just circle back and the technicality of someone getting off of a crime like this on a technicality, of course, is devastating because now you're looking at a case that most likely would never be solved. This would be a cold case. In one sense, it'll be a cold case for those that have not found Brian Koberger guilty, that are still open minded till innocent until proven guilty. But on the opposite side, you're going to have that other group of individuals that say, well, the guilty person got off on a technicality, and Brian Koberger would never live down the fact that he's deemed guilty of this crime.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no happy medium here, but at the end of the day, we don't want anybody to get off on a technicality, but I don't
No.
want to see somebody convicted of one based on a technicality either. And then we're going to have more situations like the exact case you're talking about, the Memphis Three, or many others where people are exonerated and deemed to be not the person that committed the crime and let out. And
Right.
again, we're right back at the same spot. We're at an unsolved quadruple homicide.
Yeah. Which, I mean, where do you go from there? I mean, they burned through whatever circumstantial evidence that they've had. They knocked down the house, everything. I mean, where do you go from there at that point?
You don't go anywhere, but that's where it also comes back into the discussion. You got to take a deep breath when speaking upon things like what uh, Steve Gonsalves has done. And trust me, I get it. They have every right and every say what you feel, talk, whatever. But to literally be involved with discussing potential evidence that at the end of the day isn't proven to be evidence, but also just manipulating a lot of minds towards guilt. You got to be very careful because what if he costs the other families the justice for their kids, at the end of the day by getting this tossed under a technicality, and everybody could look at Steve and say, well, you kind of brought that on yourself, man. Kind of brought that on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to be very careful. I definitely would not want to do anything that might sabotage, my daughter and my family getting justice. That's something I definitely would not want to do. So that's a very good point.
But at the end of the day, too, when you've gone through such a traumatic situation like this, are you going to have the mindset or the capability to control the emotions to not have that drive, like you said, to get the person involved in the death of my child? I want them done in. I want them convicted. I want them guilty. I want them in front of the firing squad. I get all that, too. I get all of that, too.
But you want the right person, and that's, there's no doubt about that. You want the right person. I mean, it wouldn't just be enough to have someone convicted. I want to know that the exact person that, committed this crime against my child is the one who's being held accountable.
Well, that's the thing, too. Like, you would have to ask yourself, do I want hearsay to be the reasoning for guilt, or do I want actual evidence? Like, I want
Actual
proof.
evidence.
I want proof
Absolutely.
of
I agree.
this. I don't want to go through all the appeal process thinking there's potentially a chance that everything gets overturned in the appeal process.
Right.
That's why at the end of the day, I still sit where I sat when this arrest was made. It literally took them a month to arrest Brian Koberger. And I've seen some of these very high profile
I
cases
agree.
take years to get to the suspect. Even if they knew the suspect was in their targets quickly, it still took them time to investigate, gather evidence, and get to the solid point they knew they couldn't lose at trial. I think I would have waited a little bit on this arrest. I think I would have held out a little bit longer, maybe to potentially work out the IGG situation before you made this arrest, because you knew that was going to become a problem.
They knew
Uh,
it was a problem from the very beginning. I mean, right after Brian Koberger was apprehended, you know, Bill Thompson was already starting to downplay the IGG. So they knew it was going to be a problem from the beginning.
don't we call that backpedaling?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
backpedal, like
yeah,
you're being so protective of things, you got to backpedal to try to, and yeah, I mean, that was the talk of the town very quickly when
right.
it came out IGG could potentially be involved in this. It just started really building and building, and the defense knew that was an argument, and that's an argument that's going to be heard more decisively on the federal level than it's going to be on the state level. I mean, Hitler's not open to hearing that discussion at all. That's not in. He made it clear he's not rewriting any type of case laws. He's not changing anything. Um, but I'll tell you what, the Supreme Court will. They're going to look and they're going to make some big decisions, and they're not going to be afraid to say, "Yep, this was shoddy investigative work and a lot of hiding, and we're going to turn this upside down." And I don't know, man. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't, like I said, I don't know if he's innocent or guilty, but I know right now we're a handful of months away from going to trial. We're at the point now of selecting a jury, and
Yep.
probably the highest profile case in 10 years, 15 years, to the point this one even outweighs the Mendez brothers potentially being paroled here soon. You would think that would be really high on the talk of the town. And I try to talk to somebody at the eye doctor place about that. And they're like, "Who's the Mendez brothers? What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I guess you
It's
don't know
been
true crime at all."
it's been a long time. They've been locked up for a long time.
Yeah,
You
but they
know,
know they're older people and they know all about the Brian Koberger case, and they're more
right.
willing to talk true crime, but they're like the Mendez brothers. What? And I'm like, wow, really? Okay. Um, we're just a handful of months away, and now we're having to open an investigation into a leak of substantial magnitude. Like, this isn't a joke, because Hitler would have blown this off. If Dateline didn't put out something that had some merit to it, which I don't know what it is in their show, they put out something that has some merit to it that Hitler's not happy about.
It touched a
And
nerve.
yeah, he could have come out and just said, "Well, everything said in that show has no relevance to this case whatsoever. It's all hearsay." Kind of like they came out. I don't remember what it was. I don't know what my thought was, but Hitler's like, "Ignore that stuff. It means nothing. It should be being said, but it means nothing. So wipe that off and let's move forward." He could have done the same thing with this and just said, "Here we are with more bogus information being passed along. We need to hold the media out of the courtroom. We need to," but he legitimately he took this as, "This is offensive and disrespectful to my court and me personally as a judge. I'm not okay with that."
Right. Well, and this is my whole thing. This is my whole thing about leaking information and about, like I said, the way that I looked at this Dateline special, and I approached it very open-minded. And what I saw was an attack on Brian Koberger's character. And to me, we keep hearing about all of this evidence and they've got this thing already wrapped up. Brian Koberger is, you know, they've got him. It's wrapped up. But if that's the case, then why all the shenanigans? You know, why are we doing this before the trial? If you really do have all the evidence and you've got this all wrapped up, then, you know, why are you running a smear campaign right before the trial? It just doesn't make sense.
This is not a buttoned up sealed case. Like, dude,
I agree.
I've seen cases where it's like, there is absolutely no doubt. There's not a shred of doubt that person did, you know, what they're saying was done. And I mean, it's literally people, and I see Bloom, you know, and
Yeah.
here we go again. James Patterson is releasing his book, and I mean, it's getting to be the point now. This case is no longer a death penalty true crime case anymore. This is a high profile movie premiere, book selling event, money grab.
Right.
To the point, like, you can't slow it down at this point. You can't slow it down. Howard Bloom is in everybody's minds that have Brian Koberger's guilty with all his theories because they feel as though it's 100% true. He broke into a chem lab, but then later Bloom says, no, I thought that was a confirmed thing, but it's really not confirmed. It didn't happen. And it's like, well, this is a year after you pretty much threw it out there. It did happen and it's confirmed and you know all about it, you know, and I don't know, man. This type of case actually makes me sick to my stomach, but it also makes me so thankful that my criminal ways are just so far behind me at this point that I don't ever want to even think about these types of things when it comes to myself. But man, how many people could these types of things affect moving forward in society? I mean,
I think that, you know, it's going to affect a lot of people. You know, it's going to affect a lot of people, not just the defendant, you know, not just the victims, not just the victims' families. You know, it's going to affect a lot of people, not to the level of the victims' families, in my opinion, but it's going to affect a lot of people. You know, it's hard to know what these are small towns, you know, so it's hard to know how it's affected the town of Moscow, Idaho. And I've talked to people from Moscow, Idaho, and I've heard a few different scenarios. I've heard some people say that people just don't even talk about it, and I've heard some people say that, you know, it really took its toll on this small town.
I had a good conversation with my wife, and we're probably getting up to the time limit of where I'm healthy enough to move forward. But
Yeah.
you know, I was talking with my wife the other day, and she made a very, very valid point. And it's one thing that you and I talk about too. Jen has just an outside view, a normal, everyday, you know, human being that, you know, she's not 100% immersed in true crime. She doesn't follow court case. She just that normal, everyday citizen that goes to work every day, busts her butt. And, you know, she looked at me and she said, look, in today's society, it's not the criminals that are at risk of being railroaded or found guilty. And I just kind of stopped and I looked at her. She says the criminals already expect that they're going to be investigated or chased. They commit the crimes with the knowledge that they're at risk. The problem is now society needs to worry more so that the innocent people have to look over their shoulder because they're at risk of potentially being investigated, arrested, charged, found guilty of crimes that they had no involvement in, that they didn't even have any clue of. Because, you know, I had to stop and I had to think about that for a minute because it's the truth. Someone like myself that I have a background of crime. So it doesn't hit me weird in the mind to think that I would need to be able to avoid an investigation or this. It would just be a normal part of my everyday life. Like I'm used to being investigated. So that would not make me hesitate, if I'm a criminal, from committing a crime, because I already knew that was a part of the deal anyway. So that's not a deterrent for me. So people thinking that these new IGG and these new prosecutorial ways is going to deter crime. No, it's not, because criminals aren't going to be deterred. They're going to do it. The problem is innocent people are going to be the ones that get hurt and affected by this. And at the end of the day, I look at my wife as a hardworking individual that wouldn't hurt anybody, doesn't steal, doesn't lie, doesn't do any of these things. And she's more at risk, lucky, than your typical narcotic, lying, thieving criminal of potentially getting arrested or in trouble. And that's not a good thing. That's not good. I don't know what your take is on that, but Jen kind of broke it down for me, and it made sense to me.
Yeah, it's always good. I always like to hear her perspective, because it's real simple and it makes a lot of sense. So, I always love to get her perspective when we do these lives and she's able to join us. It's always, anyone who follows my channel knows that I like to keep it very, very simple. I like to kind of talk about what I'm seeing with my own eyes and the way that I'm processing the information. So I always think that's very interesting when Jen's giving her perspective, because, it's very straightforward and very simple.
It's always interesting to me because I never understood the normality of life of a person that went to work every day, paid their bills, because I had the criminal aspect of my life. So I did things differently than the normal everyday individuals of life that hold jobs and literally walk their day as respectful individuals. Yeah. And now that Jen has yanked me over that line to come over here and learn what this is all about, and I've gotten more used to it, and I've taken step after step to live the normal way of life. And based upon your experiences in life, you've been around those people that didn't live by honesty, integrity, respect. We lived on the wrong side of that line. It's always interesting now for me because I still have the other side in me. Like in my mind, I still see it from a criminal way because I lived so long on that side of the line that I understand that side. But now when Jen has these conversations with me, because we've been married now 16 years and she's really put a marking. And like you said, it makes more sense when I listen to her in a simplistic way. It's like that makes more sense than some counselor that's trying to break it down in all this terminology of, you're this, you're that, you're narcissistic, you're blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, just give it to me on a level easy to understand. I'm not that intelligent, man. Break it down common sense wise for me. So I get what you're saying, because it took me a minute to actually open my ears and listen to her and listen to other people like her. And I found myself very engaged in listening to your content very early on, before we even became friends, because it was simple. It was easy to follow. It was easy to flow. And I think true crime, that's extremely important. I think that's why the Idaho 4 case, we're sitting here right before trial, and none of it still makes sense. None of it. It's too complex.
Well, it's one of those things where I feel like it's easy to go down rabbit holes. It's easy to do that, and something that I do is when I do my research, I usually go to like the coffee shop down the street and I sit outside and I do my research there, and I do it while life is going on around me. There's people around me that are going to work. There's people around me that are just getting their lunch. They're on their lunch break. So I like to be in an environment where I'm surrounded by reality, and that's how I like to do my research, because it helps me to keep a level head, Thank you, Denise. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I think it's a good way to stay open to different angles. And for a long time, I struggled with the different angles because I only knew one angle.
Right.
I only knew my experience and I relied on that. So when I came to the platform, I kind of dug my feet into the dirt and I was willing to just, here's where I'm at. This is the way I think. And then now that I look at the Idaho 4 case, and I'm looking in a very like dedicated, forced, open angle. Meaning I want to see it different ways. And that's why I'm willing to listen to people. And I'm not trying to any longer argue or disprove certain things or this or that, like I was on the path of trying to do. I want to take it all in and help formulate my thoughts and my opinions based off of numerous different angles. And I just got to come to the ultimate, conclusion. Lucky, I'm no less confused by this case today than I was 3 years ago when when it actually happened, and I watched the walks to the podium of law enforcement that I knew were lying. It was obvious, and now I still don't understand.
And
And
I
that's
agree. I'm in the same spot. I feel exactly the same way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so open to listening to so many different sides. I don't care if you think that Brian Koberger committed this crime. I don't care if you think he's innocent. I don't care if you're right down the middle. I want to hear everybody's, perspective and everybody's opinions, because I have learned a lot of things. I'm not closed-minded. I want to hear all of the information. And that's why I'm so willing to listen to everyone who has, an opinion and has, thoughts about this case, because we just never know. You're absolutely right. I feel like it's maybe even more confusing now than it was, 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brutal, be honest, is discussing the fact she actually worked at a medium max state penitentiary for 5 years, where she met people in there that she didn't feel belonged there, and that they could have been friends on the outside. And I'll kind of lead this into our closing for the evening. There was a CO on one of the penitentiary yards that I was housed at. It was a closed custody, maximum security yard. I had earned my way there by getting caught with cell phones and doing dumb things on lower level yards, and I earned my way to a higher level yard. And he was just really relaxed. And I remember him walking by my bunk one day and looking at me and going, "What the hell are you doing here? Like, why are you here?" And I looked at him. Of course, me, narcissistic AR Hayes, is like, "What do you mean? What am I doing here? I'm a criminal. Here's where I belong." And he's like, "No, man, you're better than this. Like, you're legitimately better than this." And I took that kind of hard at that time. And then, I realized his dad ended up passing about a year or so after I met him on that yard. And he obviously left that yard, and I ended up getting transferred to a medium yard. And next thing you know, about a year later, prior to me getting out, he pops back up, and he's a guard on that yard. And he's quiet. You could tell he big loss. I just walked by him and I said, "Just keep your head up, man. You'll be all right." Him and I talk to this day. We still talk to this day. Just based on the fact that he gave me my respect, and I in return respected him, no matter what our backgrounds were, no matter what it was. It wasn't like this relationship I was telling on people and he was giving me I had no privileges from him, and I didn't make his life easy either. But at the end of the day, we both had respect for each other, and today we still talk. We still talk to this day. He still respects my wife. I still talk about his dad, keep him prepped that his dad's always with him. So, brutal, be honest, I absolutely understand what you're saying. I respect the fact that you feel that way. It's that open-mindedness that we don't judge people based upon places that we are or things that we're going through at periods of time in our life.
Right.
And that's why I think that, in my last statement, when I tried to sit down and do content on the Dateline episode, I knew that was an attack on Brian Koberger as a person. That was not an attack on Brian Koberger based upon the evidence of the crime they potentially killed 4 people. That was an attack on him personally to get people's mindset and emotions riled up that they can't see past the anger they have for Brian Koberger, meaning that he never would get a fair shake no matter how the trial plays out, no matter how the experts explain things. Brian Koberger's done. It doesn't matter. He's emotionally convicted right now. And I'll leave it up to you at this point. I'm wearing down a little bit, but I want to give you the chance to say your piece and also say what you want to your crowd here.
Yeah. So basically, now I did make a video about the Dateline Special, and maybe I'll release that after this live. If you guys want to see that, maybe I'll release that after this live. But I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who was in the chat. I was really watching it kind of close, and there was a lot of differences of opinion, and that's okay. That's what I want. I want differences of opinion. I want to hear different perspectives. And for the most part, it really, everybody looked very respectful to each other. And, even though we all don't agree, everybody looked very respectful to each other. And I really appreciate that. And I want to say thank you, because that is the type of community that we're trying to create. I don't want to do the whole pro burger guilter side thing. I want to be able to talk about true crime with everybody. So I just want to say that I really, really do appreciate everyone who was in this chat. And everyone, I didn't go through this chat and block anybody or take anybody out. I feel like everybody was pretty respectful, so I really want to say thank you for that, because that's really what we're trying to accomplish. And I guess I can speak for myself, and I know the AR feels the same. But I want to say thank you to everyone who watches my channel, Unfiltered Lucky. We just hit 20,000 subscribers, which is mind-blowing to me. It's amazing, and I truly am appreciative of that. And the thing is that, I appreciate you all. I appreciate everyone who follows my channel, everybody who watches my videos. I appreciate my members, the Unfiltered fam. And I know there's going to be some new faces in these members only lives, because I know that there were some memberships that were gifted. And in our next live, AR, I'm going to learn how to gift memberships. So I'm going to work on that. And I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate you guys a lot. And, without you guys, none of this is possible. And that's something that I think about all the time. So I just want to say thank you. And thank you all for being here.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's the community that really keeps us puttering along doing this. I myself sometimes enjoy the opportunity to step away and just take a breather, but then I realize I gotta at least try to make an effort to do one video or one live a month, or do so. I don't have the umph that you do, Lucky, where I actually dive in with excitement into my research things on that day. I do it, but not as much as I should, and hopefully I could work my way back to trying to get onto the platform is a little more often than not. But it's always so much fun, Lucky. And for the people out there that wonder, this is what Lucky and I are like, not only on the actual stream, but behind the scenes, this is what we are. We discuss things, and trust me, Lucky and I don't agree on everything, but we discuss things respectfully, and then we enjoy the conversation. And that's what our community should be about. Um, it's not a division of people, whether you feel someone's guilty or innocent. It's a division of people if you disrespect each other. And we just want a community that doesn't fall into that and doesn't resort to that. Um, we like opinions, we like debates, we like conversation. That's what it's all about. And Lucky, I appreciate you joining me tonight. I know, I think we made this decision to do this within minutes. Like,
right,
this
last minute.
This was not a well-planned situation. But I definitely appreciate you stepping up to the plate and spending some time with me. And it's a great conversation. I hope we get to do it again soon.
We will, for sure. Because I got to learn how to gift those memberships.
Well, then you better talk to Jen. I can't help you, but I know how to hit the button on my side. I don't know what the hell's wrong with you on your side, man.
I don't know either, but I'm going to get on top of that for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely get it to where we can get you some gifted memberships to your great community. And I definitely look forward to doing some more work, not only with yourself, but and discussing this case some more. But I know we have other plans as well with other cases and other things too. So absolutely, everybody, we definitely appreciate you. I'm going to say my goodbyes. Lucky, you say yours, and then I'm clicking end.
I appreciate you guys. Have a good night. Good night, y'all.